Hello, and a massive hello to everybody. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's having a great weekend. This is 50 Pips rocking and rolling here, 9th of April, 2017. No trade calls, no recommendations, every response for their own stuff. We're here for educational purposes only, as always. So, what's going on as we go into a new week? So, again, a week is starting. I think we got Kuroda and Yellen speaking at the start of the week. Then we got a lot of UK data with CPIs out and unemployment rate and stuff like that. We also have the BOC speaking on Wednesday with a press conference. We've got decent data out of Australia with the unemployment numbers. We got China data out, and again, don't forget that Friday the markets close. U.S. markets are closed for Good Friday, and again, there's some decent U.S. data out on that Friday. So again, futures, Forex are going to be open, but markets are going to be closed. So we'll have to see what happens there. So what's going on? What's going on? Don't be surprised if you see a little bit of funky action into the open on Sunday with a lot of things closing at their highs or at their lows. So you might see a little bit of follow through. You might see some gap action. So what's going on? What are the things to focus on? Now, I think a lot of people, since we've seen these closes either at highs or at lows, will be ready to talk about strong continuation and follow through. Of course, anything could happen. We tend to be in the camp of, we don't think anything major has happened just yet. Okay, so if we look at the DXY here as we're hovering here, I think first of all the kind of head and shoulders guys are going to be very disappointed here. Not something we're really concerned with. As far as we're concerned, is we're looking at this in terms of levels and in terms of the choppy action around the moving averages, right? So our call was still that we were forming a top and we had to come back down, right, into that 200. Done. And now we're moving back higher. If you remember, what we said is that 100 level was going to be pivotal in this rotation, still in the context of this triangle, right? But that 100 was going to be pivotal, and a move to the upside, we'd have to look at this whole broader zone. Again, we're not giving you a level to the pip. We had to look at this whole broader zone, right, with these two moving averages and this descending trend line. Now, reminder, as long as we're inside this whole area where we've got the 200, the 100, and the 50, we consider this a chop zone. So we're not too concerned about velocity of move inside this range. What we're far more interested is, daily closes below the 200 or daily break of this trend line and a daily close back above this 102s, right? So the way we're looking at it going into the week is it's strong. It's likely going to try and take some more stops to the upside, and how we behave around this this descending trend line is going to be key. Daily closes above, most likely it'll try and take a stab at this 102, sorry. Daily close below, then we would expect this area to start to try and work its magic and see a resumption of the move back down towards the 100, all things being equal, still stuck inside this triangle here and a lot of chop unless we start to see some moves. So if anything, we say a little bit of strength here and then possible Momo back to the downside to keep it inside this this triangle in terms of the dollar index, right? Now, ES, what's happening on the ES? So we're not going to change our tune, right? As far as we're concerned, if you look at it on the monthly, our take is that we would feel the healthy move would be to see this being a short-term top being put in last month and for us to see some kind of a correction lower, right? If you look at it on the weekly, I think here what the weekly is telling us is that there's an awful lot of indecision, not much going on. And if you look at it on the on a daily, right, what's going on here on the daily? Well, not an awful lot, right? We're hovering here. I think the bulls are gonna keep on saying we're getting bid and we have to go and rip back into new highs. And the bears will probably saying we put in that top and we're making a series of lower highs and we need to break back down. So right now, flip a coin, right? I think both both arguments make sense in the context of an extremely choppy sideways action here, right? I think in the same way, if you look at the shorter time frame, something like the 1 hour on gold or something, we continue to see choppy action, right? We start to see signs of these aggressive moves down. I think this was the real tell after the FOMC, right? We ripped higher, the market held it bid as it usually does, and then we got that puke, right? Then we got the puke here on the Syria, and news, and nothing happened there. But all things being equal, this is still holding the monthly high. The high on the monthly is still holding, and we're still getting this series of lower highs. So all things being equal, we still think this is the key, the most important tell. And the second important tell here is action post the minutes, right? The rest is just noise for now. Now, of course, shorter term, you're getting a market where most likely you get a lot of people trying to jump on the short bandwagon, or where you get the news of the US bombing, everybody's trying to get short, jump on the short bandwagon. And as soon as we don't get any Momo, bam, the short-term money, short-term traders are forced to cover, and you get these kind of air pockets, both to the upside and the downside. But we wouldn't be reading too much into that. Again, for us, the main focus is that top, those highs we put in March, and then the action post the minutes. So we're not going to change our tune, still looking at the same things, and we still expect this to be choppy, but ultimately, we expect the healthy move to be for us to try and find some kind of downside action, right? Even if we probe a little bit higher this week, shorter week, to then ultimately try and come back down. If you look at the bonds on the ZBs, a lot of people are getting excited on this close here. Again, we think it's a lot of wheeling and dealing. Don't forget that we got a lot of chop towards the end of last week. Also with the Syrian news, a lot of people trying to, bam, get long bonds, get long gold, get short stocks, and then they didn't get paid. So they're, especially the short-term money, forced to cover. So we think those dailies look a bit funky because of that too. But all things being equal here, we're done and dusted on the first rumor. We expected this fake out to come in and then reversal. 1, 2 zones, okay? So the first move is done, only healthy to see a retracement. So that was the first 4% up. And now what we'd be looking at is shorter term, how are we gonna behave at these moving averages? If we catch a bid, we could go back higher, or we could get sold hard. But broadly speaking, we still think this broader basing is in play, and ultimately we expect this to come into play rather than new lows for the year. So the first move is done and dusted. Now a lot of chop here, but if you want to call, we say this prints before new lows for the year prints, okay? And again, as we said, because of that Syria, you got a lot of chop, a lot of people trying to position to square it to hedge, and then having to take those off if you got no follow through, as they got no follow through. So we wouldn't read too much into the action, but that is, that's just us. And then in terms of CL, what's going on in crude? Fairly interesting action here. Now, again, we expected some sellers to come in here, and we got that initial heavy close, and then we got whatever, Syria, chop, etc. This is holding bid. Now the way we're looking at this is this could be a complex top forming or trying to coil for higher. Now of course there's always two sides to the story. What do we think are the key areas to watch is, as long as we don't get a day close above this 55, right? As long as this whole area, it's got a multi-confluence of resistances. You've got a 78.6 of this move down. You've got all these failures. So as long as this area continues to find offers and the market can't close above that, we expect the path of least resistance continues to be this 45 being a magnet for a bigger correction, right? If you want to look at clues, if you look at the weekly, you get a pretty decent look here on the weekly in the sense that as we're hovering here, the market's trying to protect this level, right? Call it 155s. As long as we don't close above, then we expect the downside to attract, right? Whether that's for a move back down here, whether that's for a bigger move, we'll have to see, right? We don't know yet. But as long as that 155 doesn't holds, we expect the 45 to come into play. If we get a day close above there, then we think the squeeze could really be on, and we think we'd be looking about 10 bucks to the upside, back into that 200, back into that 65 level. Okay, that's the way we'd be looking at that. In terms of currencies, what's going on? Well, we looked at the DXY. What's going on cable? No change for cable. We've been talking about this for a long time, since last year, so I'm not going to bore you with our views of the fundamentals or whatever. Basically, we're still looking for this to come back down. We're still looking for this 120, 150s to attract, and we're still ultimately looking for 116s to come into play. That hasn't changed. Going into the week, what we would say is, as long as we don't get daily closes back above these two moving averages, then it's really constructive for the downside and these 120, 150s to attract quickly, right? If we get daily closes above, then don't be surprised to see more squeezy action, right? And again, as we've been saying all along, we would not be surprised to see this reacting very different to euro in terms of, you know, dollar influence on the pair because of the Brexit, etc., etc. If you're looking at yen, a lot of people are calling for this time to pop hard, time for this to drop hard. We're not changing our tune here. We think there's an awful lot of chop here inside this area. Unless things resolve on the equity side, we expect to see a lot of air pockets in this side, a lot of two-sided trade, but ultimately very, very little edge. So we would not be surprised to see this popping back up into the 112, 113. We would not be surprised to see this moving down into the 109, 108. As long as we hold here, it looks very choppy. Now, shorter term, yeah, it looks like it's trying to base here. You've got all these wicks here. We could see a little pop, but ultimately inside this zone, it doesn't mean an awful lot to us, okay? And Euro USD, what's going on in terms of Euro USD? So I'm not going to go through the bigger picture view because that's the charts on the blog, and we've discussed that a lot. Let's look at this in terms of slightly shorter term view. Here, what's happening, it's a tricky one to call, right? Because you've got a lot of support down here in these lows, and right now it seems to be trying to base here at this trend line, right? The problem is you've got the whole 50, 61 of this area, of this move from A to B coming into here. Then you've got all these previous support zones coming in here. Then you've got these previous lows, which are actually, I think, if memory serves, the 78.6 of this move again. So what happens here is, does this look heavy as it's broken the trend line? 100% yes. Does that mean it's going to die and go to parity? We don't think so, because we think it's going to be it's going to have a hard time here because there are a lot of support zones coming in all over the place. Now, what that means though is that it's very hard to try and trade this with a very tight risk on it, because you could be taken out repeatedly and still end up being right on the trade, right? So here we'd still say look at, and that's why we also don't like trend lines in terms of to help us with actually trade executions. But you see, if you go in from those lows, go back into these highs, there you go, right? You've got the 61 still coming in, 61 retracement still coming in here. But if that breaks, you still have all this area of support, which is coming down into here, right? Look at here, you have these wicks, look how low they probed, and then it still bounced. And then you've got the 78.6. So you see how tricky it is to call a tight trade here. So ultimately, we'd say this is all a strong area of support, right? If this breaks, then there's no reason why we're not going to try and take out those lows. But you see, if that breaks, you've pretty much got this much to the downside that will likely get tested very quickly, right? The problem is if we hover in this area all the way into the French elections, right, and then we don't get any Le Pen or anything, or the news is positive and people have to unwind the negative, the euro hedges, that's your potential to the upside. So it's a really tricky trade. So I mean, I wish I could tell you it's super easy, right? But I don't think it's a tricky one. It's the same thing. If you're trying to get short here, what are you going to do? Short a gap down? Where's your stop going to be? A stop here? Very, very tight. You probably have to go up here, right? So that's still a very wide stop for going into a huge level of support. So I just don't think there's an awful lot of edge. And I think the shorts are still short and they've made their beds. The longs are long and they've made their bed. And I think short-term players are going to get slapped left, right, and center in here trying to catch a trade with a tight play in a zone which is really not favorable for that. Okay, that's our 2 cents as usual. So again, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing, liking, for the banter on Twitter is always very, very much appreciated. I'll send out the recording. Heads up, next Sunday there might not be a video. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be if I'm gonna have time to put it up on Sunday. If I can't post it on Sunday, I'll post it sometime Monday morning, but there will be a weekly video. Okay, thank you so much. Take care, guys. Bye bye.